director for a quick intro.
Hello, it's lovely to see everyone. Well, I can't see you yet, but I know you're all in the room, but I can see our wonderful panellists, and I can't thank them enough for coming to talk about this really important issue. And I've got some news on that. I've always been part of the disability community because being deaf and diagnosed quite early, but also knowing that autism doesn't just run in my family, it gallops. My children, my mother, and recently I've actually come out. I'm also on the autism spectrum. I've known it for a long time, but it's really weird when you're dealing with multiple impairment issues and how one becomes more of a focus than others. And I've started reading so much, and everything is just confirming it. My friend who's a psychologist has confirmed it. And so I'm with my sisters here in the room. I'm really excited about what they can teach us and show us and share with us, but also to know that it's okay. It's great. I see having different impairments as a badge of honour, because it gives us a new experience when we start to identify these things as positive in our lives and goes against the current negativity around disability and issues. So I'm looking forward to what they have to say. I hope you do as well. And let's all get into a good set of questions at the end of their presentation. So welcome everybody. And I just need to give you a quick audio description. I'm white, in my early 60s, got brown shoulder length hair, grey bits coming through it, and a dusty pink top on. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Ruth. And welcome to the club that you were already in, but now we know. Okay, so I'm going to go around my lovely panelists here and ask them to do a quick intro, tell them something about themselves. It's not prescriptive, just whatever you want to say. So because we've been doing the flyer and everything in alphabetical order, I will start with Amy. So Amy Richards, your turn.
Hello everybody. Very happy to be here. So I'm an online business manager. I'm a self-employed person. I was a teacher for about 12 years and ended up having to leave that profession, in the process of which I started discovering some things about myself and ended up being diagnosed autistic about 5 years ago. So after experiencing some burnout and some sort of problems in mental health and so on, so I found some answers. Yeah, and I'm here today because Rachel very kindly invited me. Yeah, so very happy to be here and to share some ideas with you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Okay, let's go on to Ree then, please.
Hello, I'm Ree, and I was diagnosed with autism about 5 years ago. I suspected I was autistic for about 10 years before that. I'm a writer, poet and playwright, and I mentor and I work as a mentor and advocate with autistic adults, as well as an autism trainer and conference speaker. It took me a long time to realise I was autistic because women aren't supposed to be. You're not supposed to have a sense of humour, you're not supposed to be caring, you're not supposed to be connected, you're not supposed to be loving. There's all these stereotypes that come with autism. And all these sort of ideas of autism, I didn't recognise myself in any of them. The sort of Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory or the Rain Man, not me. And so being a writer, I decided in 2017, I wrote a play about being a late diagnosed autistic woman called The Duck. And we've been touring it around the UK since 2018. Which has been absolutely brilliant. We should have been at the Edinburgh Festival this year, was not meant to be. But getting my diagnosis really changed my world. It took me from comparing myself to everyone else and thinking of myself as a faulty human to realizing that actually I am a perfectly formed autistic person. And that was so important for me. So for me, diagnosis was like the beginning of a new era of actually feeling really happy with who I am. And that's why I'm here to share that. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. Let's go on to Selena then.
Shemai, I'm Selena. I was also diagnosed fairly recently, 4 years ago. And just like Ree, I knew for about 10 years before that I was autistic. But a little part of me was like, maybe I'm not autistic enough to kind of be part, to really own that label. But there are many, many, many of us who don't feel autistic enough. And so, you know, it's a bigger community than I guess we first imagined. I am one of the directors of Aubergine Cafe, which is an autistic run arts organisation. And we are coming to the stage where we're just finishing renovating, and we'll hopefully be able to open our doors, but we've been running online programs, arts workshops specifically, and that's been going great. And we also have a weekly drop-in, but that's about my project, not me. I've got a background in working as an educator in sexual health, drug education, smoking, those sorts of things. I've been a support worker for people who are in recovery from addiction, alcohol mostly, and also I've worked in disability and autism specific services for quite a while now. So I've got lived experience and quite a bit of professional experience as well. That's me. Oh, audio description. I'm black, but I've got very fair, very light brown skin, dark brown, very curly hair, and a short, sort of short back and sides kind of haircut, just 1.5 inches long, about 3 to 4 centimeters long. I'm wearing a gold necklace, which has a pendant with the shape of the island of Jamaica on it, and I've got a red, not red, what colour is this? Pink, a dusky pink jumper on.
Okay, thank you very much. No, nobody's actually asked for the audio descriptions, but I'll do a quick one anyway. I'll let people decide if they want to do that themselves or not. So I'm sort of butch-ish, quite butch-looking lesbian. I'm white. I won't give away my age just yet because we're going to talk about that in a minute. And I'm wearing black glasses, and my hair's a lot longer than it normally would be, about 1 inch long. So that's me. So this discussion, it kind of grew out of talk we're having at the moment about whether we add a word. So Disability Arts at some point added a word, disabled and deaf, because deaf people, especially those who have had BSL as their first language, some people identify more as a linguistic minority than as disabled, because if everyone used BSL, deaf people wouldn't be disabled people. And when we're talking about adding a word, you know, we might add the word neurodiverse, we might add the word neurodivergent with an S on the end. So we're talking about that at the moment. So this came to me that our autistic people a cultural minority in a similar way to how deaf people are a linguistic minority. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, we are, because if everyone was autistic thinking, we wouldn't be disabled by the society we live in. It would just be the normal thing to think like we do and behave like we do and have some of the difficulties we do, but maybe those would be obliterated because they wouldn't use, nobody would have invented chemical perfume or those horrible cleaning chemicals or any of that stuff that, you know, overload our sensory systems. So that's kind of how I was thinking about it. And yeah, the more people I've talked to, especially these three here, the more I sort of start to really believe in it as a thing. And one of the things that makes me believe in it is, before this, I had a conversation with each of these three lovely people. And the same as any conversation I've had with other autistic people I know, it's a very different thing to talking to neurotypicals. We talk, we stop, maybe we pause in the middle, but when we're finished, then the other person comes in. we don't end up with this talking on top that neurotypical people do all the time, and it's really hard work to be around. So that again convinces me in a way that this autism culture thing is a thing. So do any of you want to talk a bit about how you see that? Go for it.
I think it's really interesting, this question. I feel like Aubergine Cafe tries to answer this question in its very existence. The reason it came about is that I've been in a series of jobs where I've ended up kind of almost being bullied out of them, because I may well have been the best at the job, but because I struggle with one thing like filling in timesheets or something, which everyone is supposed to do, then I end up going on probation, and and I've had so many issues at work which just felt really unfair and targeted towards me because I didn't do things the same way as other people. I didn't think the same way. One day when I left my last job of employment from someone else, by an organization, I left one day after having a head injury due to having a meltdown because of a situation with my line manager, and I never went back to that job. But I thought, do you know what the issue is with being autistic and trying to get work and stay in work? It's not the fact that we're autistic, it's the fact that everyone else isn't. And that if everyone else was, maybe work would be more streamlined, everything would be more efficient, people would communicate more clearly, those sorts of things. And somebody, and I actually express this view on social media, as one does, and somebody replied with, why don't you do that? Ta-da! 3 years later, here we are. So yeah, that's what I set out about doing. And what we've done is we've created this space where all of us are autistic, and those of us who those people who are working with us who aren't autistic have shown that they can respect our space. But the conversation, as you described, Rachel, is very different. Everyone communicates so much more clearly. People will ask questions that they're normally too afraid to ask, and people will give honest answers. And they know that when they talk to us, that we mean what we say and we say what we mean. So there's none of this confusion or wondering whether it's okay to ask something, wondering whether their tone was wrong and all of these things, because we'll just say it. And that, I think, is something which strikes me as somewhat a community factor. That does make us a community that is different. We communicate differently. We use a different language, because language is so much more than just the words people say. It's how they say them. It's how they communicate them to one another. It's the tones we use. It's our expressions, or whether we read those expressions. That's my input. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it, Ree. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Selena's just said. I think we are, in many ways, speaking a different language. It's that idea of interpretation and how we're understood by other people. So if I'm at work and I'm stuck talking to somebody about Coronation Street for half an hour, they're being friendly. So I've got to interpret that as them being friendly. But if I go to somebody and say, can I please have this information, because that's what I need, I'm being blunt and rude. And it's the idea that there's this dominant method of communicating that is correct, and there's the autistic way of communicating which is incorrect, and that's simply not true. They're just two very different ways of communicating. I was reading a study done by Dr. Catherine Crumpton just this morning, which she's done so much work into how autistic people socialize, and it's really, really interesting. What keeps coming out time and time again is that autistic people communicate with each other just as successfully as non-autistic people do. But when you put the two groups together, that's where you get the misunderstandings. And it's always put upon the autistic person that they've got the deficit, They've got to make the effort. They've got to be the one to change. So when we are in these mixed groups or speaking to anybody who is non-autistic, we're the ones who are expected to make the effort. Now, if we do have this social deficit, then how come we're the ones who've got to do the extra work? That doesn't make sense to me. Whereas actually, if you go into every interaction with kindness and understanding and assuming the other person isn't trying to insult you by asking you for work or any of that, you know, being clear is so lovely. And it's one of the nice things about being with autistic people is that trust you have that they will tell you if you've got something wrong, if you've misunderstood something, if you've misinterpreted them. You don't have to go away and think, how did I get that wrong? What did I offend somebody? Oh my goodness, I've just realized that when they did that, they were doing a social cue that I completely missed that meant that. And now I'm the one who got everything terribly wrong. When you're autistic, particularly when you're late diagnosed, you grow up being wrong. You are always the one in the wrong. You spent your whole life getting it wrong and everybody else was right. Whereas actually, I think that's fundamentally wrong, that there are two different languages. I love the use of, Selena said, languages. I think there is a sort of translation that's needed between the two methods of communication, that we need a bit more generosity between the two methods of communication. And there is certainly a social difference. We have that social culture that is completely different, the way we interact. And I don't want to lose that. The first time I was ever in a room with other autistic adults, just us, and we were all stood in a circle and we were all sharing this experience of being misunderstood and how we are all cold and rude and aloof and difficult and blunt. And I was looking at these people and going, but you're all so warm and lovely. And I have no idea where this is coming from. How have you all been interpreted like this? Why am I being interpreted like this? That's not who I am. But that's that misunderstanding. Yeah.
There's a lot of nodding going on, isn't there? And it's just as well I had my mic off. Do you want to say anything about this, Amy? Or are you just repeat?
No, yes, I will say something. I was really interested to hear that about the fact that autistic people communicate really well with each other. I interviewed somebody for my own podcast a couple of weeks ago who'd actually taken part in some research into autistic communication. She's autistic herself. And that's exactly what they found, is that when they were in the groups with just autistic people, they were communicating perfectly well. And it was only when they were in groups of mixed people that the communication difficulties started happening. So yeah, it's really clear that we're only disabled when we're in groups that we're not able to really communicate well in. Whereas, you know, put me in a group with people like me, I'm absolutely perfectly able to communicate. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we kind of established it's a thing, isn't it? It's a thing. So I've kind of put out a few questions that it was on the flyer and I've given it to the panelists in advance, but there's one little thing that's kind of come back, an additional thing, is that some people think that people with autism tend to look a bit younger than they really are. So I'm going to put it out to the audience. Have a look at us, see if you can add up our collective age and put it in the chat box. If anyone gets it exactly right, I will send them a duck. That's a promise. Keep my promises. So the first thing on that list of kind of talking points was about the language we use. So there's the, do I have autism or am I autistic? That has changed a lot in the last few years, because the with rather than is, it's shifted. People are now saying I am autistic rather than I have autism, a lot more than they used to. And then we're also trying to untangle, are we neurodiverse? Are we neurodivergent? Are we? And actually, it was Ree in talking who gave me the clearest understanding of this. Would you mind repeating that, Ree?
No, I'm happy to. I've had it explained to me by the brilliant autistic artist John Adams many times. He's great at far better at explaining it than I am. So neurodiverse is everybody. When we talk about neurodiversity, we're talking about everybody, whether you're autistic, not autistic, ADHD, every brain type, including, I don't want to use the word normal, because I don't think that exists either. So that when we talk about neurodiverse, that's all brain types. When we talk about neurodivergent, that's somebody who's got a brain type that diverges from the typical. So neurodivergent people are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, long list. So anybody whose brain does not work in a typical way is neurodivergent. But the idea of the neurodiversity movement is to say that all these brain types are normal. They're all absolutely standard human brain types. And there are many different human brain types that are a part that make up humanity. So it's not seeing the predominant neurotype as the standard one. It's seeing everybody's brain types as completely equal but different. That's it, really.
So if you were putting the word on disabled, deaf, and which word would you use? With
neurodivergent.
With an S or without an S?
You could do neurodivergency.
Disabled, deaf, and neurodivergency?
Disabled, deaf, and neurodivergent. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
All right. Yeah. Do either of you want to talk to that, Selena or Amy?
Yeah, I guess I think that language and language use is complicated. It's very complex and it's very fluid. And having had that explained to me, it would be the correct usage, I think, in terms of the English language. However, I used to be one of those people who really picked apart the exact use of words. And to be honest, it's still me in my heart. I haven't left that behind. It's just I have those conversations in my head instead. I understand, though, that the way that people use language is sometimes not the same as how it is. So if somebody was using neurodiverse and everyone else in the conversation understood them to mean neurodivergent, as you explained it, Ree, then I'm not going to go and say, oh, actually you're using the wrong word. And I think that kind of it's where we start to take things to a point which is kind of in loggerheads. Sorry to use a metaphor right now, but in loggerheads with how language changes over time. How its common usage changes over time. And so I think we also need to be prepared that we're going to come across organizations that use it differently, and that might make us feel angry once we know the proper usage, but let's try and not let that harm us, and understand that sometimes people just use words a little bit differently, and that sometimes that's okay. I guess that's just an opinion. That's my opinion. I think if you have a very strong opinion about it, which is different to mine, that's also okay. I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, I do agree that if I was to now use that in our social media, I will make sure now that my social media team uses neurodivergent instead of neurodiverse because of that, and that's what we would do.
Okay, good. All right.
Can I just jump in there and say,
yeah, please, yeah.
Just Selena, I really like that point. That makes a lot of sense. And obviously the way people use language is not the same as actually understanding exactly the dictionary definition. Interestingly, I was looking up before this just to see, because I thought I knew these, but I looked up to see the dictionary definitions of them. And interestingly, the definitions that I came across actually said that neurodiverse means the same thing as neurodivergent, which is interesting. And I totally understand what Ree was saying. That makes a lot of logical sense, but the actual dictionary definition is the same, or virtually the same, that I was able to find. So.
But I think, yeah, with dictionary definitions change over time because they are there to reflect common usage as well, which
Yes.
but also dictionary definitions are very, very small, and quite often it's like 1 or 2 sentences to try and explain what is a whole academic subject. So we shouldn't take those with a pinch of salt. I think I've read a dictionary definition of ableism as discrimination against people with a physical disability. So, and we know that that's not the full definition. So yeah, always take dictionary definitions with a bit of caution, and remember that dictionary definitions come about after common usage. So it's not like this is the definition of the word and then it becomes common usage. It's like if you see a definition in there that's kind of different to as you understand it, probably because that's what the common usage is at the moment.
Yeah, exactly, because I probably thought they were the same myself because of the way I see them being used. It's really interesting that different people have seen them being used in different ways, I guess.
Really
Yeah, I
good.
think it's the person who came up with the definition who defines it. Well, obviously they define it. I think it's really important. The most important thing is, you know, when we're talking about these things, that we all understand what each other. It doesn't matter if you get a word wrong, as long as the other person knows what you mean. That's the primary thing for me anyway. My only thing, I would like to see neurodiverse kept separately, because I think it's really important we have a word for everybody, that it's a really inclusive term, because it actually is everybody. And then and the idea that all brains are brilliant.
Yeah, all brains have their own special things. You just have to find it, don't you? Yeah. Is it worth moving on to the thing, what I've defined as the 4 most argued about topics in Facebook autism groups? And it's a bit of a kind of hodgepodge, but I think taking this opportunity to inform people who don't take part in these discussions a lot about why things are changing, the way we talk about things are changing, and even the therapizing of young children is changing. So the 4 things are Asperger's, which is no longer you can't get it as a diagnosis, but it also has problematic associations. Functioning labels, by which I'm talking about low functioning. He's low functioning, she's high functioning, they're low it's very divisive. ABA, which is a type of therapy practiced on young children that has changed somewhat, but it's responsible for a lot of what are now traumatized autistic adults. And then there's the puzzle pieces, which you see a lot in logos of autistic or autism related organizations, and why we are now rejecting the puzzle pieces and looking at a different kind of visual logo thing instead. Does anybody want to have a go at one or more of those topics?
Can I just start us off with some functioning labels? Okay, yeah, I find this a really interesting one, because it just seems to me that using functioning labels and talking about us being high or low functioning, it just seems to kind of gloss over a lot of either people's struggles or the things that they can excel in. And it just seems to, I don't know, because basically I feel that I'm, from the outside, probably I'm going to look fairly high functioning to most people that don't perhaps know me very well. And in lots of situations, that's going to be true. But then it depends on, you know, what day it is, what time of day it is, what I'm doing, who I'm with, what the task is, what the situation is. And sometimes I'm not functioning that well at all. So to say, give me a blanket high functioning label, it just seems to me to sort of gloss over any struggles and difficulties I might have, but also make me into somebody that is going to be very capable of doing everything without needing any kind of supports, helps, or provisions in place to make things easier for me.
Completely agree. I think I always come down to how useful are these things? What is the actual use of these labels? And what you end up with high functioning people having too much expected of them, and low functioning people having not enough expected of them. And you're writing off one group and you're expecting too much for another. And actually, right, okay, well, what do they really mean? When we're talking about high functioning, what we actually mean is you've got an IQ of over 70. It's not actually that you can specifically do any particular task. So when we're talking about autism, we are all so very different. We all have our strengths and our difficulties. And you have to look at each and every person individually and how they are functioning in relation to that specific thing. So for me, functioning labels, I don't see how they help anything. And I mean, 4 very different topics as well. ABA, I think, there's a few things I could say. There's so many autistic adults who have been through ABA, come out the other side and feel traumatized about it. And I think any type of treatment that tries to teach compliance is not helpful, because I don't think what we need as autistic people is to learn to ignore who we are. We need to actually learn to listen to our bodies, to learn that we are right when our bodies react to something. So if I hear something that is intensely painful to me, it's wrong of me to try and pretend that that doesn't hurt. It's really important that we don't teach young autistic children not to listen to their bodies, not to stim, not to actually be who they are. We need to learn. There are skills you can learn that you don't have to learn how to suppress who you are. And when it comes to puzzle pieces, it's really outdated, isn't it? I mean, it comes from a time when autistic people were thought to be missing something. We were supposed to be disconnected from humanity and not actually a part of the human race. We weren't supposed to have proper feelings. We weren't supposed to love anybody. We weren't supposed to interact with anything. And actually, that is such an outdated view of autism. And the puzzle piece, it just needs to go away now. It just needs to, I get it, but it's from a time when we were not understood in the same way as we are now. And it's lovely that, that so many societies that used to use the puzzle piece have put it to one side, have listened to autistic people, have listened to the community and actually got rid of it. And that it would be really nice to see that die a death.
Totally agree. Yeah. Anything to add, Selena?
Yeah, so just coming back to labels again, the high versus low functioning. We've at Aubergine, we tend to use, it's very difficult to come up with the right kind of term, but like more apparent and less apparent support needs, which is the closest we've kind of found to describe what we're trying to get across. I think that people see us, those of us who are able to do things like take part in panels and have sometimes quite academic discussions. People see us as being like really smart. They imagine that we're probably really capable elsewhere in our lives. They don't realize that we also have those same sensitivities and meltdowns that somebody who is non-speaking and labeled low functioning has. We also have those. The difference is that we're able to communicate our needs. I like to show people like a Venn diagram of like people who are autistic and people who are able to communicate their needs, and there's this little sliver in the middle where the two circles cross over, and that's people like us, people who are able to hold these panels and speak on behalf of those who have those similar experiences to us. They are similar experiences to us. It's when I see somebody who is non-speaking having a meltdown and hurting themselves, I know what they're feeling. I can look at them and I have this huge empathy, and it's this crushing pain inside and this frustration, and it's communicating pain. We understand that. So I think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we are also those children at times, and autistic children grow into autistic adults. Some of us were non-speaking when we were children. You know, some of us were the problem child who got like put in the timeout room and whatever when we were at school. And then we left school, and I guess our puberty developed later on, I don't know, and we became who we are today. So we still are those people. Sorry, I'm going off on one now, but like I'm just really quite passionate about this idea that there are a lot of people out there, particularly those who consider themselves part of the autism community, who are not autistic themselves, who see us as not representative of autistic people. And I'm here to argue that we are. And how that relates to those like functioning labels. In terms of like Asperger's versus autism, I understand that it's now not something that people are diagnosed with. There are people who are going to still use that label because it's what they were diagnosed with, it's what they're comfortable with. And I think how people self-identify is okay. What I feel is not okay is when they use them to differentiate themselves from autistic people who have a learning disability. So it's saying, oh yeah, I'm autistic, but I'm the good autistic. I'm not the, you know, it is. And I just find that's just really, it's just really icky. It's not okay at all. It's really discriminative. And I don't like to see that within our community, because I feel as though like we're all critical thinkers. We can do better. We don't we don't have to be like the rest of the community. We can do better. Yeah, so that's like, I personally, I think we're all in it together, and I would probably have been diagnosed with Asperger's, but I use autistic myself because yeah, I want to represent all of us. In terms of puzzle pieces, I think that's already been said. It's like, you know, yeah. That's another thing that's like from the non-autistic people who trying to imprint their idea of what autism is onto us. Again, we can do better. So yeah, let's just do it ourselves. I really like the gold infinity. I like the rainbow one too. The gold one I just love because I'm a science buff, and I like that it's gold because AU is the chemical symbol for gold, and you know, that's just me. There we go.
Yeah, do you want to add?
Couldn't agree more with everything you just said, Selena. I think, yeah, when it comes to, and we do forget that I can appear really, really, really socially competent and all of these things. I can be a really good communicator. I can explain what I'm thinking. I can do all these things. And, you know, I've got 5 kids. I'm married. I live quite a relatively normal life. And people are really surprised to hear that I've been in a supermarket on my own as an adult. Oh, I have to add one on because I did it the other day 7 times because I can't do it. It's too much. It completely throws me off. It's a perfect storm of hell. And the number of times I'll be at something and I'll be standing there smiling like this because this is my default. God, I'm panicking. I can't cope with this. I'm sort of screaming inside my head, and all I want to do is run. It's a lot of effort goes in as an adult to appear to be high functioning, even when you're not, because you don't want to be vulnerable in public. You don't want to be visibly different. You don't want to be, we've all been bullied. We've all been, our differences have been noticed throughout our lives, whether we were diagnosed or not. I don't think I've met any autistic person that has gone through smoothly. And so it's really, really important to remember that, yeah, I can go and I can stand up in front of people and I can do a talk, and you'll think I'm really high functioning. But if you see me tomorrow, when I have this banging headache and I'm alone in my room and I'm rocking and I've got my noise cancelling headphones on because I need complete silence because my brain is so burnt out by what I've just done because I've overprocessed and pushed it to its absolute limits. Had a great time, absolutely destroyed myself. Then you might look at me and go, oh, well, she's a bit low functioning, isn't she? Because she can't find the words. She can't talk right now. That is still a thing. I still have times where I can't find the words. And it's really horrible as somebody who is really verbal to suddenly go, I can't, that connector's not there. I can't do it. I can't. And it's really frightening. And so this idea, again, high functioning, low functioning label, which one are you going to apply to me on which day? As Amy was saying as well, where's the use? I do like the idea of actually thinking about needs, support needs. That's the relevant bit. That's the only relevant bit. What support needs does this person need in any of these situations? Helpful. That's what I'm after.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Yeah. And the high and low functioning thing as well. The only thing I picked up, Selena, when you were talking about that I'm not sure about is that even people who are probably going to be deemed high functioning or were given the Asperger or whatever, we can't all express how we're feeling all the time. And, to different extents, of course, but, I know for myself, it's taken decades for me to be able to name emotions. I think that's one of the words I put out a long list of kind of weird things that you get under the autism spectrum, but what is it, misophonia or something, which is the inability to name the emotions. And it also makes it really, really difficult to do any kind of therapizing because you can't talk about them. So how do you talk about them? So I saw your finger there, Selena.
Misophonia is the fight or flight reaction to certain sounds.
Yeah, alexithymia.
Alexithymia, that's the one.
That's the one.
Alexithymia, yes, struggling to process like what you're feeling. Does that also apply to things like pain and feeling unwell? Those kinds of things. Yes.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
I have this. I actually communicate with the people who are closest to me to ask them to look out for times when I'm unwell, because I can't always tell. And like I was the sort of person who would have to be sent home from work because I didn't really quite know that I was too unwell to be at work. Some things I know, like, I've got really, really bad back pain today, I should stay in bed. That was a lot more obvious to me. But other things, like when I was a little child, I would be playing, and then suddenly just stop and throw up because I didn't know that I was unwell. And with feelings as well, I use a feelings wheel. I didn't realize that I'm not very good at talking about my feelings. It was only when I was with someone who is very emotional who told me, and that's a couple of years ago. So when we were having discussions, we would use a feelings wheel, and it's got lots of different feelings in this circle. In the middle, it's got like sad, angry, happy, excited, something like that. And then you can break those down into like things like worry or disappointment, to try and narrow down the feeling. Really helps. It really helps with communicating with neurotypical people. I can't remember the question.
We were just talking about the difficulty in naming feeling, and yeah, you're right, feeling is more than emotion. Feeling is how you experience pain, how you experience feelings of unwellness as well. So yeah, I think it all probably comes under that same banner, but also there are environmental factors which make a difference to that as well. Amy, yes. Ree, sorry.
Yeah, just picking up on what Selena was saying about having people around you who understand you when you need help. That was something happened yesterday. I'm just going to go off on a tangent. We're demolishing some sheds outside, and I decided to get on with it a bit on my own. So there I was with my hammer, and anyway, I managed to hit a bit of wood, which knocked a nail into my hand, and it went right in. And my husband from the house heard me yelp, and he shouted out the window. He said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." So he came running because he knows that if I just go, "Yeah, I'm fine," I've gone into, I don't know what's happening now. If I say, "Oh no, I've done this," he knows it's probably all fine, and he came running and helped me deal with it. But it's that idea of having that help, not responding to things in the way that people expect you to respond to things, particularly difficult things, particularly pain or discomfort and emotions. What you were saying, Rachel, about not recognizing the emotion you feel. There are certain times, if I've got something, a big change coming up or a transition coming up, I will start behaving in a certain pattern of behavior that my husband will recognize as stress. I don't. He'll go, you're a bit stressed. You need to go and sit on your own for a bit and chill out. I have no idea what's going on. He is far better at recognizing my patterns than I am. But afterwards, I can really see it so clear, you know, and having that, being able to go back through all your emotions and work out what they are is really helpful. And having that little wheel can be really helpful just to work out what's going on. But the idea that, again, just because we're verbal, as you were saying, Rachel, just because we're really verbal and really good at describing stuff, doesn't mean that we have that automatic route through to what's going on inside.
Work one day and says, oh, by the way, I've been seconded to Birmingham for 6 months. And I didn't say anything. I just walked away and I didn't mention it for a week. And she didn't know it. We didn't know each other that well. So we'd been together for maybe 4 or 5 months. And afterwards she said to me, I understood more about you in that week and how you operate, because eventually you brought it up and we had a conversation and you knew what you thought about it and it was fine and we talked through and made the decision. But I kind of left you alone because I wasn't really sure how to react, because she's neurotypical and she didn't really know why. I just went silent for a whole week on it. But yeah, it was just a delay. I didn't know what I thought, didn't know what I felt. I felt something, but it took me a week to process that, and then it was fine.
That's specifically called delayed emotional processing, which is it's a really good phrase to put on your PIP forms and stuff like that. By the way, everyone, you know, get all the good phrases. Yes, super common, this delayed emotional processing. Also, we respond to things differently, like grief, losing someone. People might think, why are they behaving that way? This is really odd, you know. People need to remember that autistic people often respond to things, emotional things, differently. And I did have another example. Nope. ADHD moment where I've just kind of had too many thoughts going.
Come back to you if it comes back.
He's got something.
Yeah, I've got an example of that. So certainly I've got a few autistic people in my family, and one of our inappropriate responses that I've certainly done myself at times is laughing when really, really upset or stressed, and it comes out as this sort of hysterical laughter, and it's like, this isn't funny, this is completely inappropriate, I know I'm being socially inappropriate, but I can't control this burst of laughter that has nothing to do with being happy. That sort of thing can be so misunderstood at difficult points, and it's so important to recognize that we respond to things differently. That's it, really.
I'm going to jump in because we're sort of edging towards taking a break and then bringing anyone in. So I think, you know, looking at the list, spectrum versus continuum, I think we can probably skip this. Hopefully everyone knows by now that autistic spectrum isn't a continuum from one end to the other. It's a much bigger thing than that. We can talk about metaphors another day. But let's just quickly go back to the age thing, because I don't think anybody got the exact age. I'll check in the break. But there is something about being perceived as younger than you are, and thanks to whoever said 70 as the total age, teenagers. But that has knock-on effects of you being perceived as younger than you are and taken less seriously as if you were younger. And that sort of around the puberty and young adulthood, that has quite a marked effect, I think. And I always couldn't wait till I turned grey, because then I thought people would take me more seriously. And I am getting there now, but they don't. So, yeah. Anybody want to have a quick riff on the age thing?
Yeah, I have been told with almost looks of horror throughout my whole life since I was a teenager, that I look a lot younger, or appear to be a lot younger than I actually am. I was a teacher for 12 years, and I think the kids used to struggle with the fact that I think they all thought I was very, very young, even when I really wasn't. And it was difficult sometimes to establish that authority, because if you look very, very young and they perceive you as being that, even to the point where I remember once one of the, it was a non-uniform day, and one of the TAs, the teaching assistants, actually mistook me for one of the children in a classroom of kids that were 14 and 15 years old. It was mortifying, as you can imagine. But yeah, it's happened to me all my life. I got ID'd for various things, you know, when I was in my late 20s. I don't know what it is, because I wonder whether it's not just looking younger. I think it's almost being perceived to be younger. It's something more than just how we look, I think, isn't it? It's something to do with the way we act or the way we come across, I think.
Possibly emotional maturity, immaturity as well. Yeah, really.
Yeah, I had the opposite when I was much younger. So when I was sort of 12 to 14, everyone thought I was an adult, and I'd be, yeah, somebody would say, so, you know, which pubs do you go out to? And I'd be like, oh, I'm 12. And I think that probably had something to do with quite a mature way of speaking, quite a formulaic way of speaking. I didn't use a lot of slang. I didn't use all that, you know, I wasn't talking about the things that other kids my age were talking about, which is probably what led to that. And then from sort of 20 onwards, I've always had people thinking I'm younger than I am. At some point, people are going to stop saying to me, oh, you have 5 kids. How have you possibly fitted that in? You can't possibly be old enough to have 5 kids. And I'm dreading that day when I look old enough to have had 5 kids. But yeah, so I do get it now. I think people, I think I look my age, but it's very nice hearing it otherwise. But yeah, it can be a real problem but I think there's that autistic joy thing that I have that is there's something so pure and innocent and beautiful about it that I love that. I love that I will notice something, and it doesn't matter where I am, and I'll go, oh, that, brilliant. The other day, I got a lovely look from a woman, it's sort of a little old lady. I was walking down the street opposite, and I noticed that there were conkers on the floor, and I thought, oh, conkers. And I grabbed a load of conkers and filled my pockets, and she gave me a look like, oh, I wish I could do that. There was this knowing, yeah, that was the right thing. But yeah, that autistic joy thing that other people don't have to happen to have, that you engage with the world, that you keep your interest and your fascination with everything, that things are still so great. I'm still that 3-year-old who wants to know why. And if you put me with a 3-year-old who asks why, then we will spend the whole day really happily wandering around going, let's find out, yay. And I think maybe that's seen as a little bit childish. Can't think why.
Too bad, really, isn't it? Yeah, I think that maybe that is something that sort of drives our fixations. Because when you talked about autistic joy there, I immediately went to kind of mushrooms, which is my autistic joy. So let's take 5 minutes break, during which I'll bring everyone into the room, try and catch up with the chat, because there's been loads of stuff going on in the chat. See if anyone got the ages right. But when we come back from the break, I will give you the answer to the ages. So let's come back at 4 o'clock. You can turn your video off or leave it on. It's up to you. But while everyone else is having a break, I'll be bringing everyone else into the room. So it doesn't all happen at once. I have to do it one at a time. So yeah, break, 5 minutes, go. Hi, everyone. Everyone's in. Can I make it? No, hold on. All right, 6 o'clock. I hope everybody's in the room who wants to be in the room. So the nearest, there's actually 2 people, guessed 166, Jackie and Jen. The real answer is 172, Dave Peacock, naughty man. So yeah, I don't know if that was kind of what you expected, but yeah, our collective age of the panel is 172. So Jackie and Jen, you'll have to send me your address and I'll send you a duck. Not a live duck. It'll be a little squeaky duck about this big. All right, so loads and loads and loads of stuff in the chat. Does anybody want to bring up anything that you were talking about in the chat and maybe ask one of the panel in particular? Oh, somebody's already got a duck. Oh, I gave you that duck. Sorry. Okay, I give ducks, it's true. Yes, thank you. Yeah, does anybody want to put their hand up or put a message in and ask anybody anything? Let's have a look.
I did just want to address something that I think
go for it.
was a point I think I missed or kind of misunderstood earlier, and reading through the chat, I kind of get it. So I did talk about us being able to communicate our needs. I guess I didn't mean that in its very complete sense. I mean that we're able to say, I feel unwell, and or we can speak and we can show in other ways, because it's not just speaking that we communicate our needs. In fact, I think that everyone communicates their needs to a certain extent. It's just that a lot of people don't know what to look for, you know. So like sometimes you can have someone who is non-speaking but can communicate very clearly what they want, you know, just like how people might learn like different cries of a baby. This one's for hunger and this one's for so on. We learn how to understand people's communication. So I guess in a sense, when I talk about that Venn diagram, I'm usually trying to communicate something to non-autistic people. And that's kind of why I talk about it in the way that I am. It's it's more about the perception of them. They can perceive that we can say, I don't feel well, etc. Does that make sense? I just wanted to explain that because I do understand that a lot of us do find it very difficult to know what our needs are, let alone be able to describe them.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. Yeah. There's quite a lot of, there's a few things I'm picking up from the chat. One is quite a few people are saying, I kind of think I'm in that spectrum myself. And there very definitely is a phenomenon of women who are being diagnosed a lot later in life. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, we tend to be more sort of culturally appropriate than boys for some reason. It's just an expectation of girls in the full, really, isn't it? But that's one thing. And the other thing I'm picking up from the chat is I want to talk more about autistic culture. So does anybody want to say something about that? How you feel about autistic culture? Do you see it as a thing? Do you have your own spin on it? Anybody want to go on that?
I'll take that one. Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, between you inviting me on and actually us having this conversation today, so I started off just thinking, you know, well, what is culture, first of all? Because in order to think, well, do we have an autistic culture? What is culture? And it's really a shared, if you take it as being shared beliefs and a shared way of looking at the world, and a shared language and shared sort of ideas and things, I think we definitely do, it seems to me, because we definitely got our own perspective on the world. And we've definitely got a lot of shared experiences, because all of the autistic people that I talk to online, that I've interviewed for my podcast, we all have very different lives, but we've all got some very shared experiences and shared ways of looking at those experiences. And it does feel, when I'm talking to other autistic people, that I haven't got to explain myself in the way that I might have to in a more general room of people or a general space. And that does feel a little bit like for me as a gay woman, being in a space with other gay women, that sense of I can relax because everyone gets it. We've got our own kind of maybe shared jokes or shared ways of looking at things, and nobody has to sort of second guess or overthink. We can just be. And if that is what a culture is, then I think definitely we have a culture as autistic people.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. I think when I started writing about autism and set up my blog, I've had so many people come back to me and say, you're describing my life. You are sharing my experiences really, really closely. And the one that really stood out to me was I got an email from a woman who'd grown up in inner city Brazil, saying that I had absolutely described all the difficulties she had, all the experiences she'd had. And I just thought, I grew up on a sheep farm in mid-Wales. I mean, I can't imagine a more culturally different two people on the face of the planet. And yet she felt that we had this shared experience. And it is that when I found the autistic community, when I started talking to autistic people for the first time, it felt like coming home. It felt like this really joyful connection. And yet we are so different, because autism is how I process the world. It's not my personality. It's not who I am. It's how I see things and how I work through things. But that shared moment in time, particularly when, as an autistic person, you grow up alone. You grow up seeing the world in a way, and you grow up assuming that everybody else thinks like you. You know, I think we all do that. Everybody does that. And the thing is, most people are right. Most people go through life thinking, I'm thinking this, you're thinking that. It's similar enough, so it's easy enough to do empathy between those people. When you're autistic, you're having to empathize with people who don't think like you. And I've always said, when I got my autism diagnosis, I didn't find out I was autistic. I found out the rest of the world wasn't. And that's a really important distinction to make, because then I needed to find my people. And although I don't agree with everything everybody says, and I don't agree with, you know, and of course we're all completely different, that sense of belonging is so important for each and every one of us to feel, you know, it felt like coming home. It really did.
Yeah, I identify with that completely. Exactly how it felt for me as well.
Yeah, me too. Yep. Miranda's got her hand up. I apologize, I didn't see that before. I was looking at the chat rather than the panelists thing. So Miranda, do you want to ask a question?
Ah, I had to unmute my microphone because it rustles every time I move, apparently. So, yeah, only I've now got another question. But the first question I had was about you talking about when you were talking about autistic people being perceived as or appearing blunt or rude. So my question is, if you lived in a culture, and I don't want to be racially stereotyping anybody, but if you lived in a particular culture where the words please and thank you, for example, don't even exist, never mind be used. So this kind of blunt, rude communication style is perfectly general and normal in that culture. So how then do those cultures perceive, treat, respect or not respect autistic people as a result of that cultural communication style difference? So that's a big question, and it's rhetorical. If people want to, I've put it in the chat if anyone wants to think about that. But the question that really I want to ask that just came up for me was in relation to something Rachel said about not knowing or feeling able to identify, never mind express, feelings and emotions. And as a person who I'm not autistic as far as I know, but as I'm wondering whether feeling like there's no point therapizing me if I can't talk about, feel or express my emotions. So I was wondering whether something like emotional literacy skills or emotional education would help, or whether that's just another way of people like me imposing our values about how we should be onto you. So those two questions. To anybody that wants to comment.
Yeah, okay. Selena, do you want to go?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, in terms of the language, I think pleasantries are things like please and thank you. I think there's a lot more to being blunt than just adding please and thank you. A lot of us are seen as blunt when we say please and thank you and excuse me and pardon me and all of those things. So there are things like tone, there's body language, that possibly a lack of eye contact or very intense eye contact that we might give. There are a whole host of things which make up the way that people communicate, and some of those are more common with our community, the autistic community, which means that, yeah, they're kind of identifiers of ours, I suppose. And so I think that I'm hoping that that goes some way to answering your question as to why people might still be treated as differently, but just because there's so much more about it. The second question, I think that's a very good question as well. Is it imposing values upon autistic people by, sorry, I'm just trying to rejog. Is it imposing by sort of like teaching emotional literacy skills? I think they're useful skills. I think it becomes problematic when people are expected to reach certain attainment levels of emotional literacy. So once they start like marking it at school and those kinds of things, I think they're useful skills. If they're not necessarily skills that I just find, yeah, another thing I find really icky is sort of like it's just the expectation of us that we can then learn these so that we can be normal. Yeah, which I think is what you were kind of alluding to. So yeah, I agree that it is a very important thing to think about. I think that most people, when they are teaching people emotional literacy, they think that they are helping that person to become a more whole human. And I think that if we were to like change the narrative around that, it might be more productive. These are neurotypical communication skills. This is how you understand what neurotypical people might mean. This is how you might communicate back to them so that they can understand you. But it's also okay that you communicate differently amongst the people that you know. You know, perhaps we can change this narrative so that we are talking about neurodiversity and all brains being okay.
It's a bit like learning another language in a way, isn't it? Or learning how to use your own language in another way. Yeah, which you were talking about before also. Does anybody want to go on that? Because otherwise there's a couple of things. Oh, Dave, yeah, did you want to say?
Yeah, hello, I'm Dave. It wasn't quite on my thought. I was more on this thought that the thought's been running along of so identity, I suppose. As you say, lots of people have probably associated with it today, possibly. I've noticed that myself, there seems to be a greater acceptance than there was. I'm 70. In my youth, there wasn't. Oddly enough, I know that the figures are such that way back it was. I thought there were 7 in 10,000 people that were autistic. Now it's 1 in 100. You know, it's gone like that. So the figures have changed. It's interesting that that women seem to be more acceptant of it. Today, we're represented far more in this forum with women than we are by men. I'm nearly 70, and what I'm trying to say is, I suppose, that I personally, I've been in a situation where people over the last 20 years, as it's become more accepted, have seen it wise to say to me, Dave, have you thought you might have some autistic tendencies? And now, because of the situation, I would find it personally empowering rather than a disadvantage. And I think this is the point which I'd like to make is, does the panel think there's any ways or things that should be done in society or even politically to try and encourage a situation where now we are getting more receptive to divergence in society, that it does become more broadcast, shall we say, that the recognition of personal autism is not necessarily a disadvantage, but can be empowering. That's the question, I suppose.
Good one. Yeah. I think Ree and Selena are both itching to talk on that one. Are you? I think I just saw Ree just before Selena. So Ree, go then Selena.
Such a lovely point. I couldn't agree more. I think things have come along, I mean, in leaps and bounds. 20 years ago, it's different to 10 years, 5 years ago. Every year we seem to be getting further and further and understanding more and more of what autism is and how it works and how it affects people. We're finally seeing more and more women being diagnosed. It was always seen as a male thing, but it just wasn't looked for in girls and women. And women and girls were expected to behave in a certain way. And so we did, because we were rule followers, funnily enough. And so we're seeing more and more that people are getting diagnosed. For me personally, one of the reasons I didn't recognize my autism in myself, so I worked with autistic teens when I was in my 20s. I communicated really easily with them. Funnily enough, we've been talking about that, social communication between autistic people. And I just thought I was really good at my job because I'd had all this autism training that said autism is all these things. And so it did not occur to me that I could possibly be autistic. And I think one of the problems with that is that there weren't enough autistic people being shown in the media. There weren't enough autistic characters on TV. There weren't all, it wasn't an everyday thing. And if we're saying there are more than 1 in 100 people are autistic, and how many people who are older who haven't been diagnosed on top of that, there's so much beneath the surface there. We're really finally recognizing all these people, this sort of lost generation, these lost generations. And the more we see it portrayed as it is, not in a sort of group of stereotypes, not in an idea, not trying to squash autism into one character to sort of go, they've got all the things and they're all visible and look, you can see them all. No, actually having people being represented properly, the more we talk about it like this, the more we have these discussions, the more it's just, I mean, my kids had autism training at school and they came home chatting about it and saying, oh, there's so-and-so in our class who's autistic and they're brilliant and they do this, this and this, and I learned this, this and this about it. And isn't autism great? And I thought, because kids are so accepting of every difference. If you get them young, get in their brains. Sorry, spending too much time with my children lately. And so there's so many different layers of what we can do to keep that momentum going, to keep that acceptance going. I think for me, diagnosis was key to my health and well-being, to me feeling happy with who I am. For lots of people, they don't need that official diagnosis. They just need to understand who they are. The more we understand ourselves, the happier we can be. The more we know about autism, the more we communicate it, the more likely it is that autistic people can recognize themselves in that and seek a diagnosis or work out who they are. So there's no one answer to it. It's a really multi-layered thing. But yes, I couldn't agree more with you, Dave. I think everything you said was wonderful.
Selena, have you still got it? Because I know you're burst into...
Yes, yes. Well, as you know, Rachel, I love the term autistic excellence, and it's something that we try to promote at Aubergine Cafe. We have our kind of like public aims, which are, you know, on our public websites and so on, but we have this overarching aim, which we don't really say, but we're a public attitudes campaign. In everything that we do, what we're trying to do is let people see that there's an autistic role model that we might not have seen before, or, you know, these are the autistic people who are the forgotten people. You know, we fall through the cracks because we don't necessarily have, obviously we may have like other comorbidities along with autism, but quite often we don't have, oh, what was I saying? Hang on, sorry, I'm just having a moment. Hang on, just a sec. What was the last thing I was saying, Rachel?
Read the captions. We have comorbidities along with autism, but quite often we, oh, it's gone, but quite often comorbidities, but quite often we.
It's the bit before that I forgot because I got distracted by the word comorbidities. Oh my goodness. Right,
I love that you're
the
showcasing how my brain
text,
works in real time.
well, this is it. Okay, well, do you know what it brings? You just talked about role models, right? Role models. Being, I was never very good at being embarrassed. It was very difficult to embarrass me. And so I'm like, well, maybe that's one of my superpowers. It's very difficult to embarrass me. So how about I show myself, sorry, I was just reading Jack Black's message. Yes, thank you. Noted. That's what distracted me, the word comorbidities. Sorry. Oh, no, I just distracted myself again. But yes, doing this in public, on a panel, so like, you know, it's the position where people are supposed to look up to you. Don't. We're all the same here, by the way. Showing that it's okay and it's, you know, it's fine. When you're in our spaces, you can be yourself. And at Aubergine Cafe, we want people to be able to have a space where you can be all of your identities at once. So I can be Black, I can be queer, I can be trans, I can be all of these things. Whereas in other places, I might have to pick which one I'm portraying that day. You know, and I think that by having these spaces and these role models and people seeing more and more that we are not just a young boy who is non-speaking and harms himself. Yes, we are those too, but we're also all of these things. And autism doesn't mean decipit, because we can bring all of these gifts to you and to your community. And in our case, the Aubergine Cafe is going to be all of the amazing art that we're going to showcase, all of this autistic excellence that we're going to be showing to the world. And I want to see more places like that. And yes, get in touch if you want to sort of like come along to any of our like groups as well. Just please, let's have more models, just more people out in public.
We've put out your links all over Twitter. It's in the flyer, so hopefully people will be able to pick that up if they want to get in touch. You're based in Cardiff, yeah? One day I'll get there. So gosh, there's a lot of things in the chat. So many things I really want to address, and we've got 6 more minutes, so we won't be able to address everything. Jet, the comorbidities thing, I agree with you, but I keep using the term because I don't know what else to use. What is there something, do you know a different way of saying that? My 5-minute bell. That was a question to Jet. You can put it in the chat or you can turn your mic on if you want to. What do we mean by that? Comorbidities. Comorbidities. We mean other things, other diagnoses, other conditions. No? Co-occurring, coexisting. Okay, yeah, that's probably better. Yeah, okay. There is, okay, I'm going to have to save this chat because there's so much in there. There's another thing I'm just quickly going to point out is that there is a far bigger percentage of gay, queer, trans, all those, you know, alternate kind of genders and sexualities in the autism community than there is in the bigger community. Selena, you are bursting to speak. Go for it. Turn yourself off instead of on.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've got a theory in this. I think there are scientists, psychologists and so on, who are looking at why this might be, why we tend to be more gender divergent and so on. I think it's simply because a lot of things like gender are neurotypical social rules, and we're just not very good at following these neurotypical social rules because they don't make sense. You know, I often think that autistic people make like really good advocates for causes such as like anti-racism stuff, because racism doesn't make sense. If you break it down, it's like, yeah, it doesn't actually make sense. There's no like actual difference between us. We're the same species. And so yeah, I think a lot of these things, we're just more likely to be able to be ourselves. I think it's the neurotypicals that are repressed. They're like squashing this down because they're trying so hard to like fit into these rules that they've created themselves, and they should just be a bit more free like us.
I do wonder if
3 minutes, sorry, go on.
Really quickly. I do wonder if it's because we don't process social information automatically, because we're doing it all consciously, we can see it all, it's all laid bare. If you're doing it automatically, maybe stuff sneaks in behind the scenes, you know, and it all, yeah, that can't be fun. It's much more fun making your own decision about who you are.
Totally. So, but we have to finish on time with these things. It's just the way it is. So Amy's been quiet for a long time. Is there anything you quickly want to say? And then I'm going to go to Ruth to wrap us up.
Yeah, so just quickly to speak to what was just being discussed then. I mean, it is absolutely fascinating to me that does seem to be quite a trend that we do seem to be overly represented as in gay people who are also on the autistic spectrum. And I wonder whether it is just a matter of we're just more because we don't think in the same ways as neurotypical people, I think perhaps we're just more open to exploring the differences within ourselves anyway, and more open to embracing those differences, perhaps. Maybe it's not that there are more of us, just there are more of us who are open about it and happy to explore that side of ourselves.
Maybe, yeah, gosh. You know, I could take this chat and probably get another 3 or 4 sessions out of it. So much interesting stuff, and I wish I could address every single thing, but I can't. So going to go to Ruth to wrap us up. And but thank you so much to Amy in alphabetical order, and Ree and Selena and everyone else who's been here today. Thank you.
And also I want to say a big thank you to Rachel for putting this together. Can we just do a wave in our cameras and just really thank you, and the speakers. It's been a fantastic conversation. I do want to remind you that we are an arts organisation, and I think what is really quite exciting is that many artists are on the autism spectrum in different ways. There's lots of very famous people I know who have not come out, who should be. And one of the great things about how society is moving on is that this is part of humanity. This is our lived experience, and we needn't be afraid anymore. One person, an autism school teacher, was looking at my daughter when she was in secondary education and said, "I've got a cure for autism." And I was like, "Oh no, what's he going to say? Oh, this is going to be scary." He said, "We all walk out the room." And I think that's one of the problems. It's what we impose on people that makes our lives hard. So I hope there's been a lot more understanding today. And for those of you who don't know where you are, research it, come out with it, and don't be afraid of examining who you are in this life, and keep in touch with us. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll hope to see you at the next Script Talk in a few weeks. Bye.
Thank you. Everybody.
Well done, everyone. Thanks very much.